Severe thunderstorms and flooding continue to impact much of New York. While the rains have passed, the cleanup work remains. We hear from a state expert on the next steps in the process. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. While the weather has cleared up for the most part, many across the state are continuing to clean up after heavy storms this week. New assistance is now available for homeowners recovering from the flooding in the Hudson Valley. Homeowners in Orange County can apply to receive a portion of $3 million in recovery money. Each household can receive up to $50,000 in emergency repair grants. The governor explaining while this is a step in the right direction, the state has a long way to go to fully recover.
It may look sometimes like we've returned to a state of normal, but it's not really the case if you're one of the 1,000 families who had damage to your home and your most prized possessions. The
governor went on to say that the recent storms have caused over $50 million in damage. New York has applied for a FEMA major disaster declaration and is in communication with the White House for infrastructure repair. Well, joining us now to break down the state's response to the extreme weather, Jackie Bray. She's the commissioner of the State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. Welcome. I kept thinking, good luck fitting that in a business card. That's a big title. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, John.
We've had a little distance from the storms and the flooding. For those who kind of were in and out of the newscast that week, how bad is the flooding and how bad was it?
This was a once in a 1,000-year rain event. Between 8 and 10 inches of rain dropped in a very focused area of Orange County in 6 hours or less. Just to give you a sense of scale, 8 inches of rain is 80 inches of snow.
Right.
It's a tremendous amount of precipitation. And, you know, we get 8 inches of rain over the entire summer in a heavy rain summer. So this was a really catastrophic and historic rain event. And the flooding was catastrophic. You know, I've been down in Orange County 3 times since the event. There were bridges washed out, there were roads washed out. There are dozens of homes that have major structural damage from the water. You know, you see those parking lots where the cars sort of look like they were picked up by the water and you know, tossed around like pickup sticks. We saw that in Highland Falls and Fort Montgomery and West Point.
And water damage has got to be some of the worst damage you can do to anything, correct? I mean, in terms of the mud and everything else, it's not just something where you can sweep it up and you're done.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, this is heavy equipment comes in to help people clean up. There are teams of volunteers, Team Rubicon, which is a team mostly of veterans that are down in Orange County now, helping people muck out their basements, clean out their first floors. And it's going to take, in some instances, it's going to take weeks to get the structural damage resolved of the public infrastructure. We had a wastewater treatment plant go out, and so that stuff is a long time to clean up.
Did the storm do what you thought it was going to do, or was it a little bit worse than they even thought because it kind of sat there and dumped so much rain?
The storm was worse, but in a smaller area. Okay. So we were really concerned going into the day. We knew it would be a bad day in rain, and the governor actually started warning people a couple days in advance that this would be a really significant rain event. But what happened was it was almost like a fire hose right on a handful of communities. We also had similar levels of damage, although with about half the water up in Hamilton County, up in the Mohawk Valley and the Adirondacks. And you know, so it was more concentrated. I thought it would be a broader area, but it was a little more water than I thought there would be.
Some people would think, almost flippantly, well, this is why we have insurance. You have insurance, you call the insurance company and this happens. It doesn't always work that way, does it?
You know, unfortunately, people are required to have flood insurance when they live in flood zones.
Right.
But if you have a once in a 1,000-year rain event, these folks don't live in flood zones. These homes don't have flood insurance because it doesn't flood there.
Right.
I mean, these homes are on a mountain. It's not supposed to flood on the mountain.
Right.
And so we really have to, you know, the Governor Hochul has said this, we really have to take a hard look at what we're gonna do from an insurance perspective and a disaster aid, disaster relief perspective in an era of climate change where areas that never flooded before are now seeing more frequent catastrophic floods.
It feels like roulette. You never know where it's going to hit either, because like you said, we could have something like this, maybe not as severe, but it could hit a different community next year or the year after that.
Absolutely. You know, I often talk to my counterparts around the country, right? There's 50 of us. And we were together about a year ago, and someone said, who's had a historic weather event this year? And almost all of us raised our hands.
Wow.
That's not supposed to happen.
No.
Right? we keep seeing the worst happen over and over again. It's because there is so much more energy in the atmosphere, so much more energy in the ocean. It drives more destructive, bigger, more intense storms.
And I was talking to my own insurance agent, and he was saying to me, because I asked about this whole issue, he said, even some people, if they don't live in a flood zone, if they say, well, I want to be ready next time, I'm going to go get flood insurance, it might be something they can't even afford, because these insurance companies are paying attention as well, aren't they?
Absolutely.
It's a risk for them to give that insurance and be on the hook for all this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. Flood insurance out east and in the south, and then fire insurance in the west are two types of insurance that traditionally can be very hard to obtain, or you're required to obtain it and can be very expensive. And so this is an area of not just disaster response and relief, but public policy that needs a lot of attention from all levels of government to figure out we're living in an era of disaster. I think we all feel that emotionally and intellectually, but our policies have to catch up.
And talk about the money part of it. I mean, the state, that budget, they hammer it out over weeks and weeks, and every dollar's got somewhere to go. Is there money set aside for these things? And I'm guessing it can't be enough when you have something like this.
So two types of needed aid, right? The first is like, how do we rebuild the roads? How do we rebuild that wastewater treatment plant? How do we make sure that the schools that might have flooded are good to go and fixed? That aid in a disaster of this size is likely to come from the federal government. The governor requested a major disaster declaration from the president. We're waiting to hear on that, although I'm confident that we will receive one. New York State basically has to sustain $36 million worth of qualifiable or eligible damage.
Right.
We have already validated $75 million of damage from this storm. I think we're going to validate well over $100 million.
Sure.
So public infrastructure will get about 75% of those costs directly from FEMA, from the federal government. The other type of aid that's really needed is homeowner aid or small business aid, right? For individuals. The governor announced $3 million worth of state funding for Orange County homeowners who have sustained significant damage. We're beginning to distribute that aid over the next several weeks. And my agency has brought in the Federal Small Business Administration to go business to business to document the damage and to offer business owners, when we get to eligibility, which I think we will, low interest loans in order to help them recover.
When we get to that point, will there be a website that people can go to or a business can go to and sort of navigate it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is already, so what the counties are largely telling people is to call 311. If you had home damage in these storms, call 311. We're keeping lists of people that had major damage. And then our teams go out, we perform assessments, and I believe there will be a website. We'll make sure we get it for the homeowner assistance program.
Well, we wish everybody well, because this, like you said, a once in a blue moon storm, and it's got to be tough to have all that mud coming into the basement and everything else.
It's really tough, and some people lost everything. You know, we have homes that are uninhabitable at this point, and so the state is in it. You know, the governor's been there twice now. I've been there 3 times. Our Department of Transportation has evaluated 600 road segments and has reopened everything but 2 or 3 of them. We're going to be with these communities until they're fully recovered.
I'm saying this as somebody who was born and raised in New York. I feel like now's where you're glad you grew up and you live in New York, because the state does do well at these things in terms of taking care of people.
That's right. We are a state that believes that government has a responsibility to show up and help people, and we're a government under Governor Hochul that does that. And so we're there and we'll be there.
All right, Jackie Brand, I want to get your title right, Commissioner of State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services.
You got it right, John.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much.
We'll see you again soon. New York's immigration situation continues to develop. Some asylum seekers could be facing eviction. When we come back, we'll hear from a state lawmaker as migrants and citizens are facing those evictions as part of the state's continued response. If you have a comment or a story idea, please let us know about it. Email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on Twitter at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. As asylum seekers continue to arrive in New York, homeless shelters in the city report they are full. Mayor Eric Adams now making a plan to evict the asylum seekers from shelters after 60 days. The mayor's plan would remove the adult migrants without families that are in the city's care. Once they're given notice, they will get some help finding a new place and a job. The evictions will start with those who've been in the shelter the longest and go on a rolling basis. There's no word on how many people this will impact, but the city currently has some 54,000 migrants. If someone has nowhere to go after 60 days, they can reapply for shelter space. The move is meant to free up room for families with children. Now, in addition to the migrant issues in New York City, some residents at a motel right here in the capital region were evicted without warning in order to make room for arriving migrants nobody knew was coming. Joining us now to give additional insight into that action as well as the other immigrant issues, State Assembly Member Angela Santa Barbara. Assemblyman, thank you for being here.
Thanks for being inviting me to be on the show.
This was a surprise and a bit of a shock, wasn't it? For those watching other parts of Rotterdam, New York, right outside of Albany, people were told just you have to get out, and they weren't told why, right?
Yeah, and this is my hometown. This is where I live. I'm the assemblyman representing the area, and I received zero notice that this was happening. The day of was a crazy day because we did start to get phone calls as to what is happening at the Super 8. The first sort of conclusion we came to is that maybe there was a code issue or some sort of emergency because people were being told to leave with less than an hour's notice. And they didn't know why. They were calling our office. We were trying to gather what we could, but we literally had no idea. There was no communication from New York City, from Mayor Adams, with these actions, these thoughtless actions of sending buses up here full of migrants in need of housing. And we understand there's challenges when it comes to migrants and placing them and figuring out what to do. But what's happened here is a total disregard for our community. Some of our most vulnerable citizens were already housed at the Super 8, people that had been placed there by social services, people that were experiencing personal hardships, people that were struggling with poverty themselves. And there's a number of personal stories that'll bring you to tears. And these are people that literally just got thrown out with less than an hour's notice that what I think are illegal evictions. I'm having the AG's office look into this. I have talked to them. I did send them a letter, but I have been in conversations with them, and I'm hoping they'll go forward with this investigation because who's to say this won't happen again and more people will get displaced? It doesn't seem like Mayor Adams has any regard for communicating with any officials about this. These plans are being made in secret. It's unjust, and it's unfair to everyone involved, really. It doesn't serve anybody well.
No, I was thinking even if you support completely asylum seekers, wanting to help them, from a public relations, a PR standpoint, this is a disaster because you've got the single mom who might be fleeing domestic violence who was housed there being told get out, and then someone else comes in and now you lose that public support.
Exactly, and if you saw the pictures, they'll bring you to tears. I mean, people with kids. One situation where a mother was trying to get back on her feet. She had kids. She didn't have transportation. She was working across the street trying to get back and forth. We don't know what it was. It happened so abruptly that we had no time to prepare. We didn't even know. We don't know where some of these people went. Are they going to trust now even being placed again after this happened so abruptly? In my conversations with the AG's office, I implored them to go forward with an investigation because this is an issue that could happen again. It's devastating our community. It could devastate other communities. And then there's the logistical part of this. The county is caught off guard here, right? And now there's no food service. There's no kitchens in the Super 8. It's an older motel. I don't know the condition that it's in, but they're trying to figure out how to get food to this location, how to make sure that we're prepared for any other needs. From what I understand, the latest number is 183 so far. There's only about 90 rooms there, so I don't know what the situation is. 100 of those are children. So, the school system has not been informed. Everyone's finding out this piecemeal. To this day, we still don't have communication from New York City, which is unforgivable, to not contact any elected official, any representative throughout this process. And the information I got this morning from the city of Amsterdam, which I also represent, they were concerned when they heard this. They said, hey, this could happen here. And they started to call around to their motels. The Mayor Cinquanti, made some calls, and he found out that their motels were also approached, and they were sort of the fact-finding portion of this had already happened and they weren't notified.
Right.
I understand there's a situation now in Schenectady developing as we speak, another situation exactly like the Super 8, and this one may involve people with disabilities being displaced, homeless people that have been living in there, contracts that are in place for long-term placement just being ignored and thrown out, and people being removed overnight. That is unacceptable. Again, I am on the phone with the AG every single day now, trying to give them as much as I can to move forward with this investigation. It is needed. Working together with the AG's office, I hope we can find justice and fairness for these individuals that really don't deserve this.
At some point, it starts to feel from the outside looking in like a money grab almost, where they're reaching out to the motel, not the town, not to the assembly member, not to anybody, not to the soup kitchen to feed these people, but saying, look, we'll write you a check right now for this amount of money for a contract for a year, and that hotel owner or that motel owner just grab the dough and get them in, and then what happens next? 2 days later, they don't have food, or they don't have a way to get anywhere, or like you said, these kids, are they going to go to school? School's going to be here in a little over a month right now. What's going to happen there?
Exactly, and this leaves everybody caught off guard, and it does not make for it doesn't make for a good transition. It doesn't serve anybody well, and these individuals are being told to get on a bus. You're going to the town of Rotterdam or wherever it is, a place they've never been to before, and they have no choice but to go. But in the meantime, the decisions that are being made, this is not how government's supposed to work. These decisions are hurting people. The mayor of New York City ought to be ashamed of himself, because he continues to do this. Now, to hear that there's a possibility in Amsterdam now, and there's other talks being with motels in Schenectady happening now, same sort of secrecy, same sort of silence, and not informing anybody, not giving anybody any information or any heads up on this, puts everybody off guard and leaving a path of devastation with these actions. It's really thoughtless. It's really something that should never happen. These are elected officials. They should have respect for our communities. They should have regard for vulnerable citizens and what may happen, but none of that is happening here. I am outraged. I've been trying to reach the mayor of New York City. I had a conversation with Congressman Tonko this morning, who is a congressman that represents the area, and he's been trying to reach the mayor of New York City unsuccessfully. So no, just complete silence on this. I can hardly believe this is happening. It's just outrageous behavior.
It starts to feel like it's off their plate, and they're happy to have it off their plate, and they don't want to take your call at this point, I would think.
Well, for whatever reason, I mean, they didn't talk to us before, they're not talking to us after, and here they are going around again now trying to do the same thing with other communities in my assembly district, and perhaps in other places in upstate New York, but it's really not fair to anybody. They put everybody in a difficult position. It's not serving these migrants well. It's displacing vulnerable people, as I said, people that they're facing personal hardships. They ended up out on the street last Tuesday, and we're trying to reach out to them now, my office, to find out if we can identify who they are, to get those services restored or get them back in a safe environment.
To help them, yeah.
As you said, it may be domestic violence, it may be crime victims, it may be a number of different reasons they were placed there, or personal hardships themselves. And if they have contracts in place and they are just ignoring that and telling them to get out, the AG needs to look into, is this legal? I do not think it's legal. I think it's illegal, and I think people need to be held accountable for these decisions.
Angelo Sandoval, thanks for coming in. We know you'll have more on this coming up in the days ahead.
We'll keep you updated, yes.
All right, thank you for that. New York State trying to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, but moving to renewables has proven to be costly. Coming up, how the state is trying to balance the clean energy with the affordability. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know. Email us at news@news10.com or reach out on Twitter at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. A new commission is working to try and balance the state's climate impact goals with the need of affordable energy. The goal here of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act is to, among other goals, shift New York to a 70% renewable energy by 2030, 100% zero-emission electricity by 2040. Members of the Public Service Commission meeting this week say that while the state has had some success in transitioning off of fossil fuels, more needs to be done.
In fact, we've spent a lot of dollars that were not helpful. That's why we've had so many different refinements. And that's why also it's important for us to shake off the desire to continue to pat ourselves on the back. I get it. We're doing great work. But we've got to also address the challenges.
She went on to say issues with high costs can be fixed through subsidies and working with state agencies. Stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a moment. And finally, here on Empire State Weekly, this month marks 1 year since 988, the three-digit suicide and crisis lifeline number, was launched. Since that launch, some states have made funding this line a priority, the governor trying unsuccessfully to provide $60 million to fund the hotline centers. Next week, we'll speak with the administrators of the 988 to take a look at how things are going so far. Right now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We'll see you right here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's a full schedule of the weekly shows on 10 television stations across this great state of New York.